Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders despite the ones they hate. And in today's episode, people are making terrible decisions, going on workplace power trips, and one guy makes the worst decision ever by telling security to call the cops on him. Guys, the lineup today is super satisfying, so sit back, relax, and remember guys, this voice should only be on the Dark Fluff YouTube channel, nowhere else. So to start, I work as a security supervisor for a property management company. This happened yesterday. I was covering for an associate that booked off the last minute. The building I was at is a high-end condominium. I got there around 3 p.m. and I was expecting to be out by 6 o'clock. Now, due to the ongoing maintenance and renovation in the building, the main amenities floor, which is the gym, pool, game rooms, screening rooms, all that stuff, is temporarily closed for the week. That said, in comes a real estate agent to show a few units that are up for sale, with the potential buyer following closely. They both go to the units that are up for sale and they spend a considerable amount of time in each. I see them through the cameras in one of the elevators, trying to press the floor where all the amenities are. No such luck since it's locked to everyone. Well, after trying for a few minutes, they give up and they return to the main floor. Now, I'm expecting that the viewing's done and they were going to leave, but I was wrong. The agent walks up to me and he tells me to unlock that floor. Not even asks, he tells me in probably one of the most demeaning tones I've ever heard. This does piss me off a little bit, but I keep my calm. I politely explain to him that the amenities are locked down and no one's allowed to be on that floor. Well, apparently, the guy was offended by my explanation and he starts swearing at me, literally ordering me in front of his client to unlock the amenities, or else he'd go to a random floor, take the stairs to the amenities floor, break the lock, and enter the amenities. At this point, my politeness jumped off a roof. I told him that doing such will be considered trespassing, and I'll be forced to call the police since I can't physically throw them out without losing my job. That's when I hear the client say, "Go ahead and call the cops." Well, not even 5 seconds after he said it, I dialed 911. I explained to the operator that I was being verbally abused, threatened, and the people doing so were about to damage property while trying to trespass in a locked-down part of the building. Approximately 5 minutes after I hung up on the operator, I see two officers walking in. They talk to me first, since I placed the call, and I tell them everything that's happened up until their arrival. The other officer then talks to the agent and the client, who tell them I was threatening them and being racist. This is when I pull up all the video footage of the last 20 minutes or so and I show it to the cops. The footage that includes full audio. One of the officers smiles while watching the footage, and I also have a grin. The officer then asks for the agent's broker license. He snaps a picture of it, gets his info, and tells him that this footage and report will be sent to the real estate board in my city. Then, he turns to the client, laughs, and tells him he probably shouldn't buy a place here. The client of course asked why, and then he's told that I, after speaking to the owners of the building, want them banned from this property and they won't be able to return. All I did was call the police like the client asked. You know what, I am actually glad that the guy was banned from the building, and in my opinion, OP calling the guy's bluff and dialing 911 probably saved the tenants from having a horrible a-hole neighbor moving in, because who in the world is that impolite to a person that's doing their job? A complete stranger, I might add. And this person shares a similar story about the time they dared the cops to come. They say this was years and years ago when you could pump gas at the gas station and then pay after. At the time, I worked for overnight security. I had 2 vehicles registered in my name. One I drove and the other my sister drove. For some reason, I was getting prank calls during a 2-week period. I would always get calls at 1 or 2 a.m. After a while, it was very annoying. One night, I get this call a little after 2 a.m. I of course was mad, so I decided to give this person a piece of my mind. It went something like this. I pick up the phone and I scream, "What?" On the other end, I hear, "Hi, this is Officer so-and-so from the police department." To which I respond, "Oh, really?" He then says, "Yes, we have footage of you stealing gas from the gas station." I respond, "Oh, is that right? You have footage of me stealing gas, do you?" Right about now, the person on the other end says, "Yes, this is a serious matter. We ran your plates and the vehicle's registered to you." To which I say, "Oh, sure you did. Let me guess, you also want my credit card information too? Whatever, man. You do what you gotta do." And that's when I hear, "I don't think you understand the severity of the situation." To which I respond, "I don't think you understand that I don't give an F, officer." He then says, "I will send officers to your house right now." And this is when I say, "Please do, bitch. In fact, you can send a lot of cops to my house." The voice says, "Okay, I tried explaining the severity of the situation to you respectfully." And I just keep going on and said, "Why are you still talking? I don't give an F. Send the whole damn police force to my house for all I care. Click." Well, not much long after that, my sister calls me. She tells me there's a lot of cops at our house looking for me. At the time, I'm like, what the F? And then I start putting two and two together. My sister at the time had a druggy piece of crap boyfriend who would often drive her car. And that's when it dawned on me that he was the one stealing gas in my other car. I tell my sister it's obviously him that stole the gas, but my sister wouldn't admit that her dumb boyfriend did anything. After I get off the phone with my sister, Officer Jones calls back and I change my tune real quick. I explain I had no idea he was a real cop, and I apologized for calling him a bitch, etc. I then explain that my sister's a-hole boyfriend's the one they should be looking for. I tell him I'm definitely at work with my other car and I can get any verification he needs. And did they end up finding my sister's boyfriend? Yes, but only because he was arrested for robbery a couple of days later. She knows how to choose them. Recently, I was reminded of a story from my years working as a cashier at Wegmans. For those who have never heard of it, it's a fairly large chain of family-owned grocery stores that are all very nice. Think generic grocery shopping prices in a Whole Foods type atmosphere. Anyways, I hated being a cashier. People can be really crappy and rude to the service industry. And it definitely gave 16-year-old me a newfound respect for folks that put up with it every single day. That said, one of the annoying rules that Wegmans has is to 100% ID everyone who looked under 40 in the group when there's alcohol in your cart. And let me tell you, that rule made so many people upset, and I hated enforcing it, but I would get reprimanded if they saw I didn't ask. So after watching some dude take nail clippers from the display case, clip his nails on my belt, and then put the clippers back in the box, I decided enough was enough. I asked to be moved somewhere else with less people. My front-end manager offered to put me downstairs in the wine cellar to be a cashier there. The cellar was simply a lower level of the store that only sold wine, so not a whole lot of foot traffic down there and no nail clipper display cases. I happily accepted. My new manager in the wine department, though, was something else. Trading off for condescending customers, I now had a condescending, nitpicking manager. There wasn't much to do down there, so he would spend his free time just hovering over my shoulder, just watching me scan wine and nitpicking my performance after every customer left. He would say things like, "Why didn't you ID the obvious 45-year-old mom of 3 teenage children? Why are you leaning on the till? Why aren't you going faster? Why didn't you refer that person to me for a recommendation of red or white wine?" I was getting more and more fed up with it, but I agreed with my parents that I needed to stay at least to finish out summer. 1 week towards the end of my sentence, my manager came in very frantic looking and he called a shift meeting with everyone. He told us that the Wegmans were coming to our store for a visit, and one of their planned stops was the wine cellar. He told us we all needed to be on our best behavior. Everything must be clean, and we need to follow all of the rules. He said to us, everything needs to be perfect. It's my reputation on the line here, understood? And I thought, yes sir, understood. So, the day comes. My station's sparkling, my shirt's not wrinkled, I'm standing at attention at the till for hours as they do their store visits, and finally, their entourage comes downstairs. They say hello to me, and the manager runs over immediately to greet them, and he fawns over their every need as they tour the cellar. At one point, Colleen Wegman grabs a cart and she starts loading it up with wine that the manager is suggesting. They make their way to the front where I am, and the manager immediately moves right behind me to watch my every move, and the guy's hovering. I greet them with the standard, "Hello, did you find everything you needed today?" and begin scanning. And that's when it happened. The first bottle of wine triggers my point of sale system with the prompt that I was waiting for. It said age restricted item, enter date of birth. And I paused for what felt like minutes. I could feel the manager behind me instantly tense up, like what was I going to do? And this is when I say, "Can I see some ID, Miss Wegman?" And this is when my manager freaks out and he says, "Oh no, you don't need to ask her for ID. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Do you know why that is? Why would you ask her for ID?" This is when I wink and I say, "Well, sir, she looks under 40 to me, and standard policy is to card everyone in the group." The Wegmans all got a good laugh out of that, and Colleen agreed that I was correct and obliged me with her ID. The manager chuckled nervously, but I could tell the guy was pissed at me for derailing his perfect tour with that antic. They bought like $600 worth of wine and they went on their way. My 2 weeks' notice was graciously accepted the next day. What a win-win for OP right there, guys, making the boss hate them even more and making some high-powered allies that day. That said, if I were in the Wegmans' shoes and an employee didn't ask for ID, they're not doing their job properly, because you know how crazy those fines can be. And OP does come back to add, my boss was weird about the whole thing leading up to them checking out. He treated them like royalty or something, as if she couldn't be bothered to push her own cart. She was actually very down to earth, and she insisted on pushing it herself. Hard to describe, but almost like someone trying to fit into a friend group by impressing them with favors and freebies. He even insisted that they just take the wine without checking out. And that's when the one brother said something to the effect of, "Why would I steal from my own store? The money comes back to us anyways." So he was appalled that I would dare inconvenience them by asking for ID. So I recently met up with my uncle, and while talking about my major, which is computer science, he told me a story of when he got a promotion, his current position, by getting fired. Several years ago, my Uncle Dan had a jerk of a boss who would always flaunt his status of being a manager to the lower-ranked employees, and he would also be critical of them for the smallest things. Things like taking 2 or 3 minutes too long on breaks, talking to your coworker for even a second, or even taking a sip from your water bottle at your desk. The guy was crazy, apparently. My uncle and his coworkers hated this guy, but they loved the job, so they would put up with him for the time being. Uncle Dan told me it was so bad that nobody even wanted to interact with him outside of work, and he wasn't invited to any parties or get-togethers either. One day, the boss decides to save money for the company by firing my Uncle Dan for, quote, poor performance, and he tells him the reason why is because they can hire for cheaper. Now, my Uncle Dan is a calm and logical man. He's also very skilled in programming and has years of experience under his belt by that point in life, so he knows there would be loads of companies fighting for him. Dan didn't put up a fight about it, he just clears out his desk that day, and a month later, while looking for other jobs, he was called by his boss, telling him that he can have his job back. When Dan refused, the boss revealed that he was in big trouble for firing him with the president. Uncle Dan explained to me that he coded the system that they used to distribute assignments and organize tasks, which earned him the president's respect for his skill and expertise. So when he found out that he was replaced with someone who, as Dan put it, quote, wouldn't know his ass from an array, he was understandably livid, especially since he didn't hear about it till just now. So the boss was forced to offer Dan his position back and a raise to convince him to come back. The boss was demoted, and he was even more ostracized for the way he looked down on people in the past. My uncle still has that position today, and his pay's only gotten better due to his skills. But the boss couldn't stand being on the same level as lesser employees that he mocked, so he's not there anymore. What an ending that was, guys, but imagine that. I'm just gonna cut costs and fire someone. We don't need them. Only to hire the same person back and having to pay them way more money. Like, there are way too many clueless managers out there, and if you guys enjoyed that post, listen to this next one. My wife recently performed some tasty malicious compliance, so I thought I'd combine it with her previous malicious compliance from 6 months previous. My wife works in the finance department for a government contractor. They're mostly all work from home due to limited office space, with the exception of her team. They're on site Monday and Tuesday. In this role, she has a busy end of month every month, with the whole team working to post figures, and they're often required to work late into the evening or a few hours on the weekend to finalize the month end. This is important for later. Due to insane commuter traffic, she prefers to start at 7 o'clock and finish at 3 p.m. So the commute is 30 minutes instead of an hour or more each way, just sitting in congested traffic. 6 months or so ago, Manglement issues an edict requiring core hours, which is 8 to 4 when in the office, and more in office days. My wife emails management stating that requiring her to sit in traffic for a wasted additional 4 to 5 hours a week would mean that her evening and weekend flexibility would no longer be available. Cue a management response of, team player blah blah blah. My wife responds with a breakdown of time within her paid 40-hour work week, and how the flexibility has benefited the team. But as the flexibility is being reduced, it has a natural effect on her flexibility. But they insist. So she leaves the office after core hours and she gets stuck in traffic, and she suddenly misses the end-of-day Teams call. Of course, management doesn't appreciate this reality, but she has the emails of their insistence, can't control traffic patterns, and they don't want to schedule the meeting earlier. If they want her on the call, either she reverts back to her original schedule or she enters into overtime to take it in the office. They suggest her previous schedule for the foreseeable future to aid in, quote, team cohesion. Recently, her manglement decides that all overtime has to now be approved by a direct line manager. Cut to last week. My wife's been exiting meetings on the dot at the hour saying, sorry, I've got a hard stop now due to no approved overtime. Bam, she drops from the meeting. She's even starting to affect other team members, with her and a colleague ceasing work on the dot due to not approved. Management is of course on the hook for incomplete end-of-month figures, and they start inquiring. The team replies with the overtime edict, saying all overtime to require manager approval. And my wife says it wasn't pre-approved, so I stopped working to adhere to the new policy. My wife mentioned they haven't responded to this yet, but it's been weeks already. I'm now thoroughly enjoying her work stories, and I think reading the sub to her over the years may have had a positive impact. Don't you just love it when management makes stupid rules and it comes back to bite them? My question every single time something like this happens is why? Like, your place is running like a well-oiled machine, everything's going out on time, staff is happy, so why go and ruin a good thing? And if you guys enjoyed that story where management mucks up big time, this next post, OP embarrasses their manager when they made a dumb rule as well. Okay, so I've been bursting to share this story from my early working days. It's one of those tales that still makes me chuckle when it pops into my head, even though it happened about a quarter century ago. My first real job was at a call center, handling appointment scheduling. The team was a typical call center, a director, a manager who's the star of this drama, one lead, and one other guy, making 4 men in total. The rest of the 60 or so staff members were all fabulous women. When I first started there, things were super chill regarding bathroom use outside of breaks. The general understanding was, hey, you're adults, be mindful of call volumes, use your common sense, and read the room. Basically, we were trusted to step away from our desks responsibly. And then out of the blue, our manager decides to drop a bombshell. A brand new policy was announced. From that day forward, if you needed to use the restroom, you had to call the lead's desk to get permission to put your phone on not ready. Now, this seemed utterly baffling, especially since our call numbers were consistently excellent, and we always met the strict regulatory timeframes for our government contracts. It wasn't like we had folks waiting endlessly on hold while we were powdering our noses. This whole new rule felt like a massive overreach, and honestly, I found it disrespectful. So I secretly hatched a plan to get rid of it. Now here's where my malicious compliance comes into play. As a woman, there's certain times of the month when you need to be extremely aware of your body. Due to some personal history, I often needed to get to the bathroom in a hurry, or things could get, shall we say, very inconvenient, potentially even sending me home early. It was a constant, sometimes embarrassing struggle for me. I typically work the 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift. After the morning crew clears out, the office would get wonderfully quiet, with very few calls coming in. My desk was a mere 10 feet away from the leads, and we'd often just chat between calls since we were so close. No need to use the internal phone system. On one of these quiet days, I overheard the manager talking with the lead, and that's when a little light bulb went off in my head. This was my moment. I waited a few minutes and then casually interjected myself into their conversation. I looked the manager dead in the eye and I said, "Danny, I'm on my period and, I need to go use the bathroom to change my tampon. We don't have any calls on hold right now, so can I please go?" And hearing me say that, the manager's face literally drained of all color. He looked incredibly uncomfortable, but given the situation I just laid out, he just mumbled, "Okay." I put my phone on not ready, and I calmly walked off to the bathroom, leaving him looking utterly mortified. I stood in the hallway outside of the secure door for a while before coming back in. He was gone, but I knew that I made my point, and guess what? The very next day, that ridiculous bathroom policy was completely revoked. We no longer needed permission to use the restroom. Mission accomplished. Yeah, that is definitely one way to shut a stupid workplace rule down. Cause the person who made the rule to be super uncomfortable. And honestly, like, what kind of rule is that, right? You're trying to tell grown adults that they need permission to use the bathroom. Like, I'm surprised that rule lasted as long as it did, and way to go OP for that wonderful malicious compliance. My first job was in a seaside ice cream shop up in Maine. In the summertime in Maine, ice cream's huge. There are any number of small, independent creameries that serve their own ice cream, and many times the portions are huge. This was not the case where I worked. We were known for being on the expensive side, but because of the location of the shop, my boss could get away with charging what he did. We had 3 sizes: kitty, regular, and large. Now, the kitty wasn't the same as the small. Our kitty cone was roughly 3/4 of a scoop, and it ran $1.25. Our regular was 2 proper scoops for $2.75, and one large was 3 proper scoops for $3.25. Now, these sizes sometimes confuse people because they would rock up to the window and they would ask for a small, and we would have to clarify with them, and sometimes they gave us problems. Well, one day, my friend and I were working the window. It was a slower day, and nobody was at our picnic benches. That's when a family of 5, definitely from out of state, comes up to the window. We slide it open, and the mom, who let's call Karen, loudly says to her family, "We're all getting kitties. Trust me, I know this place. The kitty cone is huge." My friend and I just look at each other, and I say, "Ma'am, maybe you're thinking of another creamery because our kitty is really small." Karen says, "Yeah, you all say that. The kitty is huge, so I want 5 of them." I let her know, "Ma'am, you're gonna be disappointed. The kitty is really meant for little kids. Maybe you should order a regular." She then says, "Oh, don't try to fool me. I know this game. We all want kitties." She then gave a huge wink and smile. She really didn't get it. I respond, "We aren't playing. We have a size chart, like right." She then stops me and says, "Give me the damn ice cream." Right about now, I slide the window closed and I look at my friend, and my friend says, "Well, we should just give her what she wants." To which I say, "She's gonna be pissed." My friend says, "Well, she had it coming." So we make the cones. I slide the window open and then pass them out. And Karen says, "That's it? That's your kitty cone?" I respond, "Yep, that's our kitty." Karen then says, "Okay, very funny. Where's the real cones?" To which I tell her, "You're holding them, ma'am. We weren't playing. That's our kitty." This is when one of her kids pokes her and says, "Mom, you said the kitty is huge and those are really small." Karen says, "Okay, joke's over. This isn't funny anymore." I just pull up the size chart from the wall and I say, "We aren't joking. You ordered these ice cream cones even though we warned you. If you want, we can change your order to regular and we'll give you the extra ice cream." At this point, she just starts screaming at us, saying, "I can't believe you'd play a trick like this on us." I just slid the window shut and Karen storms off with her family. Like, my friend and I were shocked. Literally, despite everything we did to warn her, she still genuinely thought that we were messing around with her. Unless we completely misinterpreted her wink and smile and she meant, "Hey, do me a solid and give me some extra ice cream on the side," which wasn't happening either. This happened roughly 4 years ago. I worked at an office about a 45-minute drive from my house, and I had a friend who worked in the office that I would give a ride home to. It was on my way, and I literally had to pass by her house to go to and from work. It was no big deal. Well, a woman who worked in my office lived really close to her, and she found out about this arrangement, and she guilted my friend in asking me since it was on my way. And I said, "Okay." Well, at the same time, my husband's car was in the shop, so I would make a detour to pick him up, and my husband is a giant of a man. He's 6'3", and he can't physically fit in the back. So to make things easier, my friend would just sit in the back. Well, this other woman, known as Karen, was also a big woman. Not tall, but she was bigger. So on the way home, literally the first time ever with her, she starts getting in the front, and I explain to her she has to sit in the back. Well, we get to my husband's job site, and I park and text. She jumps out of the car and she gets in the front. And this is when I tell her, "You need to go to the back." And she straight up says no because the seatbelt in the back is way too tight. It hurts her chest. I tell her, too bad. She can get out if she doesn't like it. Well, she gets out and she goes to the back seat. My husband gets there and he climbs in and I start the car and the seatbelt warning light is on and beeping. She has the seatbelt off. I tell her, "Hey, you need to put the seatbelt back on." And I'm met with, "No, I can't. It's easier if I sit in the front." That's when I tell her, "Well, you're in the back and we're not going anywhere until the seatbelt is on." She just crosses her arms like a child and I say, "I guess we're not going anywhere." I tell her if she doesn't put the seatbelt on, she can get out and walk home. With a nice bit of snark, she says, "Well, you'd better call me a taxi then." Well, that pissed me off, and that's exactly what I did. I called a taxi. She puts her seatbelt back on, but I say, "No, too late. Get out. You have a taxi coming." She puts up a fight saying she's not going anywhere. I say, "You can get out of my car right now or the police will be happy to remove you." She then gets out and her jaw almost hit the road as I drove away. Outside my friend, I never ever let anyone from my work in my car again. Oh, the entitlement of some people never ceases to amaze me. Like the only thing Karen was allowed to say since OP was driving her in the first place is, "Where would you like me to sit, kind madam?" But no, she had to go Karen and put up a fight. And I think in that case, anyone would choose their husband over a snarky Karen. Consider that taxi ride home the a-hole tax for being one Karen. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where psycho Karens are terrorizing strangers, and it's such a wild episode. Go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.